In this video, I'm going to show you how easy it is to compile and run a COBOL IT program in Variance is COBOL. Now, our goal is to make it easy for you to switch from COBOL IT to is COBOL, and we do this by adding COBOL IT syntax to is COBOL, and by enabling code replacement through external variables and regular expressions, as well as quick turnaround times for new COBOL IT compatibility features that are needed by our customers. Now, like COBOL IT, you can develop, maintain, and run your applications from a command line or from an Eclipse-based IDE. Want proof? Well, watch this demonstration, and then contact us. You can get a copy of our datasheet, and we offer a commitment-free code analysis report of your code. We'll take 2 to 3 of your most complex programs and compile them in is COBOL. And then we'll give you a report of what we did to get a clean compile and what our suggestions are for you to switch to is COBOL. I'm going to compile and run the COBOL IT Customer 0 sample. It displays a screen with options to add, modify, remove, and print a customer's flight record. I'll use the is COBOL compile switch -CMC. This is a catch-all switch that contains various compatibility features with COBOL IT. And I'm going to set some other environment variables in a properties file called iscobol.properties. I'll run the program in our graphical debugger, and the data will be saved in our default format of JISAM. However, isCOBOL supports a lot of data storage options, and that includes accessing relational databases with embedded SQL. We have an internal SQL compiler, and no precompile is needed. And then I'll show you how easy it is to run the same unchanged program in a thin client environment and from a browser window. We're also going to look at the same program set up in a project in is COBOL's Eclipse-based integrated development environment. We'll set up the environment using the same compile and runtime switches and variables that we used from the command line. The program that I'm using came from COBOL IT. It's a character screen, and it has some typical code for COBOL programs with accepts and displays, printing, and data management. It also calls a library routine named $PID. So here we go. I want to start by talking about our documentation. In our documentation, we have a Transitioning to is COBOL book, and one of the sections in that book is Transitioning from COBOL IT. This will give you a good starting point for doing your conversion. For instance, it's suggesting that we compile with the CMC that I spoke about earlier and a DCM. So I'm going to compile with those switches. We'll start by compiling and running from the command line. My Customer 0 COBOL program is here, and I'm going to compile it with these switches. ISCC is the name of our compiler, -D so that I can debug it, and the -CMC and -DCM that were suggested in the transition guide, and then the name of the program. Our compiler will automatically pick up any variables that are listed in a file called iscobol.properties. That's this one here, so let's take a look at those. I've got a few things set. In this program, if the file doesn't exist, it opens it output to create it. So I needed to set file errors OK to 1. The code set that COBOL IT uses is the COBOL 85 file statuses. So here I'm setting the file status code set to be the same so that the file errors look the same. This program prints a report, and by commenting or uncommenting one of these 3 lines, I can have that report come to the screen as a preview. I can print it directly to a PDF document called Print PDF, or I could print it to the default printer with -P spooler. Right now I have it printing to the screen with -P preview. In order to do the different printing options, I needed to set the file environment naming true. And I thought that the screen font was a little bit small as well as the print font, so I'm changing both to a size 13 font. And finally, I'm telling the runtime this is where the files are going to be kept in this folder with the file prefix. So let's compile that. And if I run a directory, you can see that now we have a Customer 0 class, so it compiled. Now I want to run it, and I'm going to use this run line I'm calling it run D because I'm going to run it in debug. And ISC run is the name of our runtime. -D will run it in debug, and here's our customer. And remember, it's going to pick up those settings in is COBOL properties, those environment variables. So run D. Here's our debugger. And I'll click on this button to start debugging this program. And then I can click on these buttons to step through if I'd like, or I can come down here to the bottom of the screen and type an S to step, and then continue pressing enter to repeat that command. So I can step through. Now the display of the PID happened on the console, which is down here. There's my PID. And I'll continue stepping. I have already created the customer file and put a couple of records in there. And here's our window. I'm going to go by this perform, just go through it, and we'll display our values. And then we'll accept a menu choice. Click back over to the screen. Let's modify one of the records that I added. So number 2. Go back to the debugger. We can step some more. You see it went to modify. And at this point, I'm just going to continue past the debugger and go back to my screen. Here's a record, the first record. Let's go down and change the date of birth. So to that. Everything else looks okay. We'll press 1 to save. Okay. So it works just as intended. Let's print a flight reservation and see that -P preview. So 4 to print, flight 1846. And here's our preview of the flight reservations. We have 2 pages. And from here I can save to a PDF or I can print it, but we'll close it now. And so we'll exit the program now and the debugger. And I want to take a look at the data file, customer.dat. So first we'll run jutil. And here's some information on the customer.dat file. Now if you want to look at or modify the data in the file, we have another tool called Jiffy, G-I-F-E. And I'll open up our file and click on OK. And here's our data fields. And I have 4 records in there. And this is a great useful tool to change your data or just take a look at your data without having to write a program to do that. All right, so now I want to run this program in Thin Client. That means that you can put your program and your data on any server, run the application server, and then on the client side, you just run IS Client and pass the host name of the computer that you have the application server running, and then the name of your program. And I'm going to run 2 of those, and then take a look at the administrative panel for the application server. We'll log in. And this panel tells us a lot. It tells us that we have in the panel running, and we have 2 customers running when they started, and how they connected. Over here, it's telling me that they connected with IS Client. Now I want to run it in the web client, in the browser. So we'll go back to our browser window. And I've already set it up in web client. It took me about 5 minutes. And so I'll type the URL here. And there it is running inside of a web browser. And I'll print the reservation again, so you can see the print. And here's how it looks when you print from the web browser. It's on a new tab. You can save it to a PDF or print it. And when I go back to my application server panel and I refresh with an F5, now we have one more connection, and this tells us that the connection is through the web client rather than IS client like these. All right, now let's go to the Integrated Development Environment, the IDE. And here's the IDE with the project that I've set up, and I've added the data to the data folder, and these files are still in the same place. I've just linked them into the project. The same with the isCOBOL.properties and our customer0.cbl. And if I look at the project properties, under isCOBOL settings, we have the compile and runtime options. And these are the ones that are added by the IDE so that everything goes into the right place. But the three that we had in our command from the command line, the CMC and the DCM and the -D to compile and debug, were all added by clicking here and checking the box, so that they would be compiled with the same settings. Here on the Runtime tab, I am also adding the configuration file, the -C, and I gave it the pathway to the COBOL properties, so everything would be picked up the same way. So I'll come up here and do a clean and rebuild. There's our class. Now I want to debug it, so I'm going to debug as an COBOL application. And I'm going to use the internal debug in the IDE, although you can also use the same external debugger that we used from the command prompt. And I have my buttons up here to step through. And you can see that we can debug this from within the IDE as well. So we'll stop debugging, and we're back to the COBOL perspective. Everything you would expect from an IDE is here. You can jump to screens, you have the outline over here, multiple windows, etc. I hope this video has shown you how easy and familiar a move from COBOL IT to COBOL can be. You can reach us by email or phone using the information on this slide to ask for more information and to get your free code analysis report. Thank you.